You know, it's quite something to watch all of these countries get together and say, we're supporting Zelensky. All these countries in Europe, plus Canada, posturing, puffing up their chest, pounding on their chest and saying, hey, we're with Zelensky in Ukraine, which is fine. You can say that. And they can say, we're going to go and we're going to support them and we're going to provide soldiers and air cover. Are you really? I find that hard to believe considering you guys have neglected your militaries for so long, and it's America that covers the bill over and over again. It's America that supplies the equipment that makes it possible. Javelins, surface-to-air missiles, anti-tank missiles, all of that. Oh, and the fighter jets come from America too. You got the French Mirage, but other than that, not much. You know, it doesn't seem to make sense that Zelensky doesn't understand or ignores completely the idea that he's been left to the globalists, the leftists, the progressives. They can't do anything for him this year. That's over. It's 2025. The globalists, the Davos crowd isn't going to help you, Mr. Zelensky. It's not going anywhere. And Justin Trudeau can say, we're going to send troops. Really? You're going to send Canadians to the front lines to die for Ukraine? I doubt it. Are the Brits going to do that? The French, the Germans are going to send them to the front lines so they get ground up in this ongoing stalemate of a war? I doubt it. Oh, and by the way, none of this is even possible without the United States agreeing. That's the final takeaway. Say what you want, posture all you want, puff your chest out. Nothing happens without America. Look, we pay 20% of the NATO bill every year. 20% is what we fund. Plus, we supply everything else. So here's something you need to know. If the Europeans in Canada were going to put all this equipment and manpower forward, here's what they'd have to do. They'd have to gut their social welfare programs, number one. They'd have to learn to start fracking. That's number two. They'd have to use nuclear power, stop the green obsessions, all the EV nonsense and the climate change nonsense. It would all have to come to a screeching halt. All this posturing and I believe in the environment and save the planet and all that bullshit would be gone. Which, by the way, it's pretty obvious none of it's true. You know how I know it's not true? Because these big banks continue to loan money for houses by the ocean. In England, the south of France, along the fancy parts of America, they keep loaning money for all of this expansion. Do you think the banks would do that if the oceans were going to rise 10 feet and put 20% of England underwater and the Gulf Coast underwater? The answer is no, not a chance. Anyhow, 20% of the NATO budget comes from America, plus we've got these tariffs, asymmetrical tariffs that punish America. That puts the EU $160 billion to $200 billion ahead every year. Look, they can pontificate and windbag all they want. None of this is going to happen. There are only two issues here. I've said it for a long time, and I say it to you because you're a subscriber. I've said it for a long time. There are only two issues here. What Russia's willing to keep and what they're not willing to keep, and what you do to prevent it from happening again. Look, you're never getting Crimea back unless the Germans want to surrender 1 million of its people and the French 1 million of its people and Canada 500,000 people to get Crimea back or the Donbass. It's not happening, my friends. That ship has sailed. Zelensky should have taken the deal that was on the table in April of 2022, but he was told no by Joe Biden and Susan Rice and these other clowns. These other warmongers. I mean, he's lost Lindsey Graham now. I don't know where you can go from here. And here's the question I ask to people who are, I'm going to support Ukraine and Donald Trump's a bad guy and J.D. Vance is terrible. And really? Well, then answer me one question. How does the war end? How does the war end? And they don't have an answer. They don't have an answer. Well, Russia has to give back all the territory and pay $500 billion. Well, that's not going to happen. Do you want a nuclear confrontation because you're pushing to have Crimea back? Are you really? Again, you're not going to see 1 million Germans or 1 million Brits or 1 million Frenchmen go fight the war for Ukraine. It's not going to happen. But if they trigger a war, which they're trying very hard to do, if they trigger a war, that leaves us screwed because that means that we have to abide by Article 5. So Estonia, who's over there posturing for a war right now, Estonia, the little republic there, one of the little Baltic republics posturing for a war right now as we speak. If they get us into a war because we added them to NATO, then we are in an armed conflict with Russia. Nothing China would like more than us in an armed conflict with Russia, because that way China can just circle right up our six. Listen, folks, Zelensky needs to come back to the table. He needs to make a deal on the mineral rights, and we need a ceasefire. That's it. There's not much else to discuss. Nothing else to discuss. We need a ceasefire. We need it now. We need to stop this folly that is the war in Ukraine. Donald Trump is right. America needs to lead. Zelensky needs to, probably needs to get thrown out, to be honest with you. Of course, he canceled elections. Everybody talking about the democracy. These people on the left, the democracy of Ukraine, the democracy. He was done last May. Oh, but he canceled elections, did Zelensky. Democracy, my ass. Ceasefire first, everything else next.